Forward Overtime. Oh, gee, baby, we missed you yesterday because we had so much breaking news. And with the Brussels attack, I think we all kind of scattered in our different directions to go do what we needed to do on that. And this manhunt is just massive now as the suspect list is growing. But, Katie, we ended the show with you talking about where I think we have not concentrated enough energy, and that is on the point of story having to do with Americans. And the fact, as you learn, that, you know, they pushed those luggage carts, those evil terrorists, they could have set those bombs off at any point. They didn't.
They waited.
They waited. They waited, and it looks like, and I haven't seen an entire schematic of the Brussels airport, and I want to, it looked like they waited until they got to a point where there would be many of us around.
Yeah, no, it was purposeful. And I just think that, you know, we were just talking during the break, a lot of it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you're in the position of power as the president of the United States and your priority is to go to a baseball game to do the wave while Americans are missing, could have been killed, seriously maimed in foreign hospitals trying to find their families. That's a basic level of humanity that the president should have for the people that he represents in his country. But one thing that also is not being talked about on a different subject, Harris, is that, you know, you just mentioned the men pushing the carts across the airport. And yesterday, Catherine Herridge pointed out that one of the hands was gloved and one was not, and that's how she knew that they were suicide bombers.
Right.
Now, why isn't the Department of Homeland Security, with all the money that they have, they spend money on telling us how to make sure we don't light our house on fire with our deep fry turkey on Thanksgiving, why is it that they're not working on some kind of program for Americans in crowded cities like New York City, in the metro system and at airports to identify what something like that might look like, so that when we're looking around and we're aware, as the FBI said, don't let it paralyze you, but it just is a healthy awareness. How do you spot things like that? Because in the age of terrorism, a lot of us don't know how to do that, and the government should be giving us the tools that we need to do that.
They're not Michael Jackson fans, is the point.
Exactly.
But and I think it's because it's such a good point, Katie. It's because over the past couple of years, the Department of Homeland Security has been instructed to reallocate its monies to not target radical Islamic terror, but to target right-wing extremism. This is one of the first things that you saw Secretary Napolitano do when she started off her tenure at DHS. And remember, she put out that memo that said the real threat to America are the right-wingers. That's really so that is where they've allocated the funds. And as we talked about earlier, in cities like New York, they've actually cut the funding as payback to someone like a Chuck Schumer who said, I don't really agree with this Iran deal because it's deeply troubling. And I can't understate how all of this is the genesis of this is coming out of the West Wing, out of Valerie Jarrett's office, Susan Rice's office, John Brennan. The three of them are the ones not just driving policy here at home, but military strategy and tactics, not the generals on the ground. And they do not have military experience.
You know, I've been thinking about something which you just said, Katie, about the single glove and how that was the tell, and Catherine Herridge reporting that yesterday, because the other hand was bare.
And they'll probably just wear another glove now.
Well, that's the thing.
However,
they will adjust, right? They will adapt. And if that's the tell, then in the future they'll have two gloves. So keep your eyes out, maybe people with gloves in the summer or something like that.
Yeah, but the security in the airport should have seen that. I mean, even if us citizens don't know that, I mean, I think that's useful, like, to know on a subway if you're there. But where are the cops, you know, where are the police people as you walk in? If they see somebody with one glove.
All right, so you saw the headlines about security in Brussels. I can't actually say it, not even on the web, because it's so nasty what they said about them. They do a blankety-blank job over there. I mean, they have taken some huge criticism, as you can imagine. And yes, we all can look at ourselves introspectively and we can say where we could be better or whatever. But they in particular, the EU now is saying, well, you know what, we're first going to have to shore them up because they just got hit.
Yeah.
But really and truly, why don't those people do a better job? I mean, I think it's a fair question.
Maybe it's part of the PC thing. I mean, remember, again, going back to San Bernardino, the neighbor saw stuff and just felt like it was, you know, she'd be targeted as a racist if she did that. Maybe there's a reluctance for the police in those countries to do what they have to do in those neighborhoods because they also don't want to come off as they're being.
So, of course there was.
Racist.
Remember here at 9/11 at the ticket counter. one of the men who boarded one of the planes was acting erratically and sweating, and the man at the gate said that he didn't want to do anything or say anything because he was scared of some kind of Muslim profiling accusation. I mean, it is political correctness kills. There's no question. But I also think there's probably a policy reason too. It's tough to do biometric data in Muslim communities because of the names. The names are very similar. They can go by nicknames. I think that's a challenge. But if you have all of that hampered with political correctness, don't profile, don't say something, leave them alone. I mean, it's very
complicated.
Julian Turner was
Kyle Sterling Hall on the live chat. Guy Benson, that is hilarious. Shep Poppy is not the president of the United States. Wow. Did you say that? I guess you did say that.
Well, I did, and I didn't mean to be too snarky about it, but Obama was just, or the president was just quoting Big Poppy from what he said, the day after, 2 days after at Fenway Park, which is great. That's a feel-good thing, and I'm a Yankees fan, but go Big Poppy on that one. I'm totally on board. But I don't understand. I was failing to connect the dots of what the president was trying to say, what his actual point was. Like Boston Strong, not letting terrorists disrupt our lives. I get all of that. But on the day of an international crisis, the president's schedule should be disrupted.
Finona says playing baseball is Big Poppy's job, his job alone. This is time for the president to do his job, not compare himself to an athlete. So kind of furthering what you say. 86 Rick says, these ISIS guys are some bad dudes. They have withstood the United States and a 65-nation coalition for 2 years and advanced their ground worldwide. Well, part of that coalition has packed up its tackle kit and gone home. So they're going to fish in their own ponds.
Yeah.
But one thing that we didn't talk about, and I don't know how many of you, I know Andrea's story, similar to mine because you've lived next to those neighborhoods. In Minneapolis, we had the neighborhood of Cedar Ridge and Cedar Riverside, excuse me. And we saw, when I moved there in 2000, we saw the Somali population balloon and some of those young people having a hard time fitting in and trying to figure out how they wanted to fit in. And we all as youngsters have gone through the point of, do I want to be like the cool kids or do I want to be like the kids that are studying really hard or what? I don't know what their choices were, but now 1 in 4 recruits for ISIS is coming from that neighborhood. So I can tell you what their choices are now.
Well, there's a lot of kids who go through the normal process in high school and middle school of wanting to fit in with the cool kids or whoever, and they don't end up being suicide bombers as a result of praising Allah for the Islamic State.
But they may not be
the
targeted like these kids. So what I'm curious about, Andrea, since you've lived in Paris, and we know what we saw there 4 months ago, in Minneapolis, these kids are targeted, and they are fertile ground by ISIS. Is it the same thing there? And what mistakes are they making we're making? Like, how do we fix it?
Immigration. I mean, we were talking about it during the break. So in the 1960s, these countries, French colonies, former French colonies, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, a lot of these European countries, from France to Germany, brought these migrant workers in to help them work. They were supposed to be guest workers. Well, they stayed. And the parents are peaceable. I mean, very, very peaceable. They started businesses. They don't assimilate. They stick to themselves. But they have offspring, and a lot of offspring, more offspring than the French do. I mean, Parisians are having 1, 2 kids. The Muslim populations are having 5, 6 children. And the French society...
And children are a blessing.
Yes, there is. But this is not the connection. And I hear people mention, it is true there is such high unemployment in France. And they're between two cultures because they're not really from Northern Africa because they were born there. And they're not really accepted in French society. But I'm not really buying that because we also see with someone like the Tsarnaev brothers, who the president referenced, they had every benefit. Every benefit. They had scholarships to elite schools in the Northeast. Yep. They had friends on Facebook that didn't think their jihadist posts were anything, anything to flag. So I'm not really buying that it's our fault for not making them the cool kids. I mean, the Tsarnaev brothers were arguably the cool kids.
They ended up on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Exactly.
I mean, you can't get any cooler than that.
We glorified it. And a lot of these terrorists, too, when you look at who they are, they're not illiterate goat herders. I mean, we have illiterate goat herders, but we also have very wealthy American, British educated, very smart bomb makers. We have also Russian trained. There's Dagestanis. There's others highly skilled, trained fighters that our special forces are dealing with.
Well, the beheader,
right now.
the infamous beheader with the East London accent,
John.
was a
Jihadi John.
rapper. Was a rapper in London.
But culturally, you can't fight
And had
something
videos
with nothing.
on YouTube.
Right.
You can't culturally, you can't fight something with nothing. And I think in the Western world, there has been a sort of almost like shame or embarrassment of who we are and proclaiming who we are and being proud of our history. You see that all the time. I have a lot of relatives in Spain, and there's sort of this, you know, in order to feel multicultural and PC, there's sort of a downplaying of the beauty and the wonderful things about our own history and culture. And so if you're not proud of your culture and you have these people that come in to it, if you don't own it, they're not going to want to own it either, and they're going to go to what seems.
By the way, just one other point that you're reminding me of, something that, because I think we've been pretty critical of the president on the show today, and I think a lot of it is deserved. One thing that he did say is that the U.S., when it comes to Muslim populations, we're a lot better off than these European countries when it comes to assimilation and welcoming people into the fold. And I think that.
But we're moving away from that. We're not being. It's not as good as when my dad came in the '60s. There was a lot more. My dad was raised in the '60s, first generation. The assimilation into American culture was much different, much stronger than it is right now.
I'm just saying, Muslims specifically. I think that our immigration policies, while there's plenty to criticize, are not as wildly insane as what we've seen in Europe. That's one fact. And the other one is we have been better about assimilating Muslims into our culture than these no-go zones where clearly the Paris mastermind of the
You're not
last...
allowed to say that word, Guy.
Which one?
Remember,
No-go is not
remember
allowed.
the flack that I took, that the Fox News channel took, for saying that there are neighborhoods, there are communities that police are apprehensive about going into.
It's just true.
We took heat from the Washington Post, New York Times, all these other outlets, lambasted us, ripped us to shreds, demanded apologies, said that it weren't true. Even though I lived there, I saw them with my own eyes. You're wrong, you're an idiot, you're a fool. They went after Fox News Channel. Now we are
London.
vindicated. Where is the correction from the Washington Post? Correcting and vindicating the Fox News Channel.
It is the terminology that they take exception with, then I don't care what you call it. But Molenbeek, outside of Brussels, and Cedar Riverside, which is something they are working on within Minneapolis, those areas are real. And we don't need the nomenclature lesson on what to call them.
Call it what you will.
But you think it is better here?
The Paris attacker was harbored for months in that neighborhood. It is vital that we have American Muslims and Western Muslims who are peaceable, who are not involved with Islamism. They are the tip of the spear. They are the front lines. We shouldn't alienate them needlessly. But this is also on them.
Yes.
We need them to do their work. And in Brussels, in the outskirts, they didn't. And look what happened.
So I know we have to wrap up here, but I'll just put this out here for another day. My father says the gateway, like there's a gateway drug, is a sanctuary city. Drop that. Discuss another day. We'll see you tomorrow.
Good point.